Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third The Ed Collab gathering. I'm Chris Lehman, the founding director of the Educator Collaborative, and we are so excited to have you here joining us this morning. The day is full of sessions, choose your own adventure, and the best part of all is that it's all archived. So if you are running out to get the kids from soccer, or if your computer suddenly crashes and you're worried that you're not connecting to anything, our entire day of sessions are all archived for you to watch at any time. Um, uh, One reason why we love a day like this is at the Educator Collaborative, we believe very much in collaboration. It's right inside of our name. Our motto is collaboration creates opportunity. And a day like this is a perfect example of that. All of your presenters and everyone who's running tech behind the scenes are all volunteering their time today. This is our great big gift to the education community. So everyone that you see has been prepping 4 weeks and late last night, and we compared notes on how many hours we slept in the evening. But we're all here today to celebrate this amazing profession that we're in and to share some great ideas with you so that you could connect with each other, with us, and just develop great ideas together. So I have a couple of things to just say logistically about today, and then we'll get off and running. We have a long, jam-packed day. Okay, so here are some things to know. So first of all, if you're joining us on Twitter, which at last check, we have several thousand of you who are logged in right now, and from literally all over the world. We have let's see, the US, Canada, Singapore, Ireland, Australia, Egypt, Puerto Rico, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Cote d'Ivoire, Thailand, Kuwait, Venezuela, and the list goes on and on and on. For those of you that are joining us, one of the best ways to connect with everyone during the day is through Twitter. So a couple of tips about that. If you're tweeting, you can use hashtag the #EdCollabGathering. That will work across the entire day. That's how you'll be able to be in a conversation with one another as you view, and you also will be able to be in a conversation with our presenters and our tech team as well. During the opening session and the closing, using hashtag the #EdCollabGathering is all you'll need to do. During the rest of the workshops today, we have 20 sessions altogether. During the rest of the workshops, you'll need to use hashtag the #EdCollabGathering and the workshop number. Now, we'll help you with that. All of the presenters will let you know exactly which hashtag to use. But you also, if you go to our main page, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com, from that page, you'll see right at the top, put a big arrow here, you'll see right at the top exactly what hashtag and number to use. So for example, if during session 1 you're joining Kim's session on 3 practical lessons for building a community of strong readers, you can use hashtag the #EdCollabGathering, space, hashtag number 4. And then Kim will be able to see your tweets, and you'll be able to talk to other people that are in that same session. So there's lots of ways to join us today. You can join us live, or as I mentioned, you can join us later. The best way to join us live is on our gathering page. There you can search for sessions based on your interest. You could say, I want sessions for middle school teachers. You can use a little drop-down menu and you'll find everything you need to look for. You also can read bios about our presenters. You can preview what's coming up in their sessions. That's really the best way to watch today. If, however, you're on the move, or if that gathering website seems like it's not letting you in for some reason, if you follow us on Twitter at the @EdCollab, we'll be tweeting live all day long. We also will be tweeting out shortly before each session begins. We'll tweet out the workshops for that session, the direct video link. So if you're in a car somewhere, or some of you have already told us you're like on the beach today, but you have Wi-Fi, you can follow at the @EdCollab, and we'll be sending out those video links for you. You can use, again, the hashtag the #EdCollabGathering to connect with presenters and to connect with each other. Last but not least, Everything's archived, so all of the videos will live on our gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com page after the sessions close, and then they also will all live on our YouTube channel, and we'd love if you'd follow us there. It's youtube.com/theedcollab, so that's where you'll be able to find us. So a few tips, because this is a virtual conference, and as a virtual conference, that means just like with any conference, things could go wrong, only there's not a clear help desk necessarily anywhere. So here's some things you could do. Number one, refresh your window. People have said this has helped them a lot in the last several that we've done. So if you're on a page and the video's not playing, but you think it should have started already, just refresh your window and chances are, boom, the video will show right up. You also can follow us at the Ed Collab, and if you have any particular issues, you can tweet us at the Ed Collab, and we have some friends that are on, and in fact I'll be on at one point, that can help you out. You also, and this is just if there's an explosion in the internet, you can visit our Mirror site, which is a much more streamlined site. The bios aren't there, you can't search as easily, it doesn't have as much content as our main site. However, if you really are in dire straits, if you go to theeducatorcollaborative.wordpress.com, that has direct links to all of the session videos from one agenda page. That page will only really be live today and then it'll close, but it's there just as a backup. And then as I mentioned, the best thing of all is it's all archived. So if for some reason something's not working for you, that video will show up at some point. Kind of what I like about this is whenever you go to a conference, especially like NCTE or ILA, there's so many sessions you wish you could go to all at the same time. Frankie Siverson, who's presenting today, she's often joked you need a duplicating machine. Well, here's your duplicating machine. We'll duplicate all the sessions for you. So just a quick announcement, and then also something fun for you to know too. Birthday congratulations to Kristen Jones. I don't know if Kristen's on yet, but we'll be tweeting her as well. Kristen joined us for a informational session this past Wednesday on some of our upcoming events this year with the Educator Collaborative, our virtual think tanks, and our study series. And so Kristen was there, she was tweeting along with us, and Kristen, you win! She was the random drawing. She'll get a free subscription to our study series. Our study series is about, I think it's 20-ish sessions across next year, about 2 a month from amazing people, some of which are presenting today. You can see a few of them on the screen there. The study series subscription lets you connect with all of these people across a whole year's worth of web sessions. So congratulations, Kristen. And the great news is you can win one too. Obviously don't do this now, but at some point between today and tomorrow at midnight, if you visit us at theeducatorcollaborative.com, you get to know a little bit more about our virtual think tanks. You can enter a drawing to win a study series subscription. So you can check those out on our webpage, and if you tweet using the hashtag #TheEdCollabThinkTanks, and tweet about what are you looking forward to in the think tanks, we will be giving away one more study series, and we'll announce that next week. And I'll repeat this one more time at the end. So before we head over, one thing that we really love about our gatherings is that we adopt a charity each day. And I feel like you should see my face, then I'll go to that screen again. We love to adopt a charity because a day like this is a massive conference with incredible speakers and sessions, and it's all free because we love you. And so what we'd like you to think about across the day is what would you spend on maybe lunch? Or what would you spend at Starbucks on a coffee, which probably costs more than what your lunch would cost? What would you spend to listen to any one of these speakers who are presenting today? And because you're not spending anything on any of that other than the food that you might have next to you at home, we'd love if you'd consider making any size donation to our adopted charity of the day. And I am so excited by this particular charity because it is the creation of our keynote speaker today, Penny Kittle, and she'll tell you more about this as she goes. The Book Love Foundation was created by Penny in order to support teachers in helping them grow readers in their classrooms. They have a particular focus on teachers who they themselves are inspired to support their kids but perhaps don't have the funds in order to do that, don't have the funds to create the sort of library in their classrooms that their children really deserve. So through the Book Love Foundation, Penny Kittle and her board of directors ask for people to write in and say, this is why I'd love to have a library for my kids. And I had the pleasure of talking with my friend Penny before we went live, and the stories that she tells about the people who are seeking libraries and then the people who win those libraries or the people who don't win those libraries, all of them bring tears to your eyes. And Penny, to this point, she was telling me earlier, the Book Love Foundation in just 3 years has given away $100,000 in libraries to schools and classrooms in need. The problem, though, is that they get stacks of grant requests that are probably this big, and with their available funding, they're able to give away maybe this many. And Penny was telling me about how much the board tries to sneak in grantees. They're like, well, I know you only said 10, but can we do 11? So anything that you're able to donate today will go a long, long way in supporting classrooms like yours in places that don't have access to the sorts of reading that they'd love to inspire for their kids. And I just wanted to give a shout out to thank BookSource. I love BookSource too, and BookSource is a huge supporter of the Book Love Foundation, and they help to put together and ship all of the libraries, and Penny will tell you more about that. So again, you'll be reminded across the day, but instead of buying a Starbucks coffee at an in-person conference you might go to, consider giving 5, 10, however much to the Book Love Foundation. You'll find more information about that on our Gathering website. So without further ado, I see that my friends are here. I'm going to hand this over to Heather Rocco, who will introduce our keynote speaker this morning. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning, Chris, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the EdCollab Gathering. It is truly, truly my honor to present Penny Kittle to you this morning. I first saw Penny in 2011 at a CEL conference in Las Vegas, and she was presenting with Tom Romano all about writing instruction, and I had the opportunity to spend a wonderful 3 hours learning with her, and it just prompted my love and admiration of Penny's work. And then I think it was that winter, Book Love came out, and I picked that book up, read it cover to cover, read it cover to cover again, and it changed everything for me and for our school in which I work. My school is truly a reading community now because of Penny's wise counsel and suggestions, and she showed us just not only how valuable it is, of course, to include time for kids to read, but the nuts and bolts of how to do it and make it work in your classroom. So we are truly grateful to Penny for that. So Penny is a English teacher and literacy coach and director of new teachers at Kennett High School and the district. That's up in North Conway, New Hampshire. And I'm sure that some of you have seen her present at NCTE or ILA. She presents all over the country and inspires us all. So I know that you are in for a fantastic treat this morning because I've had the pleasure of seeing her many, many times, and I know you're going to leave today's session just as inspired as I always am when I hear Penny. So, Penny Kittle. Thank you.
Thank you. You're so nice, Heather. And thanks to Chris, thanks to Edu Collaborative. The work they're doing is truly incredible. And I also want to thank Carolyn, who helped me figure out how to do a Google Hangout. Can I just say I'm just a little bit nervous here because I'm sitting here in my office and I've never done one of these, but I'm hoping it all connects. So I titled this keynote this morning, The Balancing of Cortex, Book Clubs, and Independent Reading. And the reason that I titled it this way and what I'm going to talk to you about is because when I wrote Book Love, I felt like I needed to dig into independent reading in a way that I just felt the conversation wasn't there in middle and high schools, that we were talking all of the time about cortex and not enough of the time about creating conditions where all readers thrive. And I felt that what needed to shift was along the lines of what Richard Allington said, which is that our kids are never going to become proficient readers if we don't dramatically increase the volume of reading. So you can see Emily there nestled under her desk on Friday reading. What I try to do in my classroom is balance the texts that I want to choose with the texts I want kids to choose, so that all kids read more. And so what I'm going to work with you today on is just looking at the first 6 days in my classroom. And I teach in a small rural town in New Hampshire where I have 3 classes in the day school. And this year I have 2 sections of 9th grade and 1 section of 12th grade. And then in the night school, which is alternative school for kids who are either struggling in the day school or need credit recovery, or perhaps work all day and need an alternative, they come at night. And so I have a night school class on Monday nights with a whole lot of other kids who are filled with stories and life and interests that I'm trying to tap into. So from the alchemy of all of that, I'm trying to get started on this school year. And so what I'm presenting to you this morning is the first 6 days, what I've been doing in my classroom, and trying to talk through some of the decisions that I'm making and why I'm making those decisions. So we're going to start with the need to establish momentum. And what I find is that in the start of the school year, my kids more than anything need a foundation of independent reading. So when I think about planning a full year of study, with a group of kids, like my 2 sections in 9th grade, I need to have times when the focus is independent reading so that they can continue to build volume and fluency and, begin to align themselves with authors and with books that they love. And so we set goals. You can notice this is our 2nd day of school, and they're setting goals. I'm doing a lot of book talks, and the kids are going to be responsible for choosing books that they can stick with and enjoy. And the one thing I want to say about book talks, I just took a screenshot of the board on a recent day. And on the left side, you can see I was book talking one for the Murphys and Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future. And then on the right side with grade 12, I was book talking Detroit, The Attack, and Little Bee. And I have a little yellow Post-it in each of those books, because I think that what I've learned about book talks is they're far more powerful if I remember to find a place that is going to keep kids, really engaged and interested in that particular book, even just for a moment, to say, listen to the voice of this and see if it sounds like something you're going to be interested in. And if it is, add it to your next list. And so that becomes really critical. And the reason that I put this up there, I'm going back so I can, give you my confession here. I book talked Little Bee the first day of class, and I was flipping through the pages, which I just hate this when this happens, but I wanted to have this great book talk, and I absolutely adore that book. But I don't know why we have that as a screen. I'm not sure. At any rate, sorry, Chris, I bet you told me and now I'm confused. At any rate, I was book talking it and I didn't mark the place, and I couldn't find this place that I'd absolutely love to read aloud. I feel like it captures like the heart of the voice of the central character, Little Bee. And I kept flipping back and forth, and I hate that feeling that I'm wasting time. And I said to the class, you know what, I'm book talking this all wrong. If you just give me a chance, I'm going to go back and find the place and then come back on the next day. And I've just found that it is the text, that voice, that will pull my kids in, and kids who normally wouldn't read all of a sudden find a book that they do want to read. So back to what have we been up to? I have a library that is expansive, that is filled with choices. Kids are encouraged to help me decide how our library should be set up so that it works best for them. And so you can see behind my 2 girls, these are seniors working, that behind them, my library is in categories, and the categories from fantasy to life stories to prisoners, comedians, athletes, presidents, different periods of history, different areas of the world, Asia, the Middle East, Africa. I have on the other side of the room all of the life in high school, love, differences, all kinds of categories that kids will say, oh, I know what's there. They then start reading, and here you have Sloan and Jamie, who read Deadline in the first week of school after I book talked it, and came back to class and said, the best book I've ever read. Now, I don't think there's any of us out there who don't have that moment when that's what we were shooting for, right? That's the, oh my word, Miss Kittle, other people have to read it. Well, it's contagious, because as soon as those two walked into class talking like that, I had 3 or 4 other kids back at the death and dying section saying, I got to read Deadline by Chris Crutcher. And the thing that I find that's so fascinating is that immediately Sloan and Jamie want to know more about Chris Crutcher, and they see Chris as this author that they're now connected to. He's a real person, and they're looking through Period 8 and Staying Fat for Sarah Burns, and they're going through my collection saying, what do I want to read next? And this is not a small thing. All of us that are readers have connections to authors. I'm thinking about Naomi Shihab Nye, who spoke at Booth Bay this last summer, and I have ordered all of the books of poetry I can find, and I have this stack on my desk. And one of my students said to me the other day, she was looking at it, and she said, wow, obsessed much, Miss Kittle? And I said, well, at the moment I am. At the moment I'm trying to immerse myself in her writing because I just find such joy there. And we want that for our students, for a student to be able to say, this is who I am, this is what I believe and love. And so that idea of it's contagious and my kids, can't stop reading is, of course, one of my central goals as a teacher of reading. And so then when you think about how do core texts intersect with independent reading, book clubs, which I'll talk about, and then the idea of some of the things that we need to read together so that we can learn together. And so, again, this is a screenshot of my board in class on the 3rd day of class, where I asked kids to look at 2 different pieces of writing from Sherman Alexie. And one is from Sherman Alexie and one's an imitation of Sherman's writing written by a former student. And so we now look at one piece together and we study it for writing craft. And I put the kids in pairs, so there's lots of talk about this. And they look at it together and they simply begin to list the things they notice about that text. And so when I think of common texts or core texts, I think of short texts and longer texts, but that the idea is some of the time, and I say in book club, 25% of the time, my kids are all going to gather around the same text so that I can lead them, so that we can have this common conversation. And then some of the time, they're going to be in book clubs so that they're in charge of the conversation and they're in groups of 3 or 4 where they talk more. And then some of the time, of course, what I consider to be a really important big percentage of the time, they're responsible in their independent reading to find books that they love and continue to read them. So I want to give you an example of what this might look like. When you use a common text as an example of craft. And so one of my seniors told me that Magonia was her favorite book of all time and handed it to me. And I started reading and immediately came upon what I consider to be pretty amazing craft, because it was demonstrating something I wanted my students to understand about the narrative mode. And that is that it doesn't always just move the plot forward. But of course, voices that we love to hear often go kind of as an aside, or they have a little commentary where they will move away from the plot to simply talk about life. And in this case, this is a young narrator who's dying. She's about 5 days from her 16th birthday, and she's been sick her whole life, and they don't think she'll make it to 16. And she often is out of breath or gasping for breath. And so here's this selection that I gave to kids in class. And if you can see it, I don't know if you can read it very easily there on the screen. I'm going to read the little bit of it to you that I want you to focus on. Adults want to talk about death way less than people my age do. Death is the Santa Claus of the adult world, except Santa Claus in reverse. The guy who takes all the presents away. Big bag over the shoulder, climbing up the chimney, carrying everything in a person's life and taking off 8 reindeered from the roof. Sleigh loaded down with memories and wine glasses and pots and pans and sweaters and grilled cheese sandwiches and Kleenexes and text messages and ugly houseplants and calico cat fur and half-used lipstick and laundry that never got done and letters you went to the trouble of handwriting but never sent and birth certificates and broken necklaces and disposable socks with scuffs on the bottom from hospital visits. And I simply ask my students, why is this a run-on sentence? And what you'll see is that, some of my students have no idea for effect. And so in pairs, as I ask them to talk about this, they can begin to share what they understand. One kid says, it's supposed to sound fast to show you she only has a little amount of time to live. Now imagine that we've turned this idea of punctuation into writer's intention. What is the writer doing here? Why is the writer writing it as a run-on sentence? Certainly, the author knew this was a run-on. This student says, to further illustrate the abundance of little parts of a person's life that alone seem negligible, but when put together in a run-on, seem like an important part of her. Imagine as we deepen our understanding of writers' choices in craft, as we're looking at a piece of literature, which I'm book talking. In other words, this study of, at the sentence level, the craft of the writer serves as the book talk, because so many of my students became instantly very interested in reading Magonia. As this student says, life is just a run-on sentence. It keeps going and going, then just stops. So then we focused on, if you look at the next section here, look at the use of the dash. At school, the whole rare disease and pending doom situation makes me freakishly intriguing. In the real world, it makes me a problem. Worried look, bang. Nervous face, bang. Maybe you should talk to someone about your feelings, Asa, along with a nasty side dish of what about God? What about therapy? What about antidepressants? Sometimes also, what about faith healers? What about herbs? What about crystals? What about yoga? Have you tried yoga, Asa? I mean, have you? Because it helped this friend of mine who was supposedly dying but didn't due to downward dog. No, I haven't tried yoga to cure my thing, because yoga isn't going to cure my thing. My thing's a mystery. And not just a mystery, but Bermuda, no sun, only triangle. So again, I send these kids back with this text and I say, why the dashes? What do you think that writer is up to? She's showing how the nagging voices of others who don't truly understand become one taunting voice of suggestions that are to no avail at all. Getting that sense of the nagging voice, the fast rapidity of what is being said there. Another student says it shows she is annoyed by all this and hears it all the time. She is bombarded by suggestions. What I think is most critical that we're talking about is that whenever we stop and we say, okay, everybody just for a minute, really focus on the craft of what this writer is doing. And then we send our kids back into their independent reading books, is you're creating that bridge so that I say to my students, okay, now when you're reading today, I want you thinking about how you would talk about the writer's craft. You're reading a book that no one else in here is reading, and you're going to notice things that no one else can notice. And I just want you to be a little more aware today about what this writer's up to in writing. Now, some of my students will return to their books, get lost in story, and not think about it at all. And some of them will reread a section looking at craft. There's such a range here. I'm not sure where we are, because again, at this, I've had them for 6 days, but I know for certain that the more I seed in these bridges between, do you see what's happening in the craft of this one writer, and then look at it in the craft of the book that you're reading, I'm going to be able to make bridges that will carry over into their writing. So it becomes so essential that day after day, my kids have time to read, they have choice in what they're reading, and then they have talk, because as my students go back into reading every single day, I sit down and try to talk to 3 or 4 kids. So 6 days in, I haven't reached every kid in my class yet, and I am talking to as many of them as I can, but what I'm doing is checking in on how's it going, what are you reading, who are you as a reader? I did a survey at the start of the year and took a look at some of my students who did not read this summer at all, which of course is not unusual, but it certainly has put a lull in the momentum that they need to maintain a reading life. And I think it's disturbing that we don't talk about the loss of momentum throughout the school year, because if we have so much evidence that summer reading loss is an important thing for us to talk about, then why don't we talk about the fact that some kids lose momentum for an entire year? At any rate, my job is to sit beside a kid, figure out what can be most helpful in that moment, and then teach into that day after day with those individual kids. Now, if we go back, time to browse matters to me. You can see a whole group of kids browsing behind Snowden there. And they're all in the fantasy section, which is a big hit right now in my room. But every day, my kids know they have time to browse the shelves, just like all of us love to browse in a bookstore. These kids have time to do that. But I want to now switch to what does this look like in grade 12 in these first few days of the year. This is a class called Research Writing, and it will meet for just this semester. I have another writing class that begins at the end of January. So in this class, you can see that I'm also book talking each day. I tend to book talk a lot of award winners, National Book Award winners or runners-up, Pulitzer Prize winners, Booker Prize winners. And so on this day, I was book talking Salvage the Bones, which I love, and Hellhound on His Trail. I mix up nonfiction and fiction every day with my 12th graders. And we're going to use one text together. And that one I chose was This Is Football Worth It from Time Magazine. And it's a really compelling blend of the modes of narrative as well as information, or the kinds of writing that my students are going to be doing this semester. And so we all took home a copy of this and marked it up with what did we notice about this blend. But you'll notice that after we had discussed that, and my students had done quite a bit of writing about it, I asked them to make the next choice of their study text. And this is going to drive them into what are very, would look like book club groups, because they're going to gather around the text that they chose. And so they were able to choose from Trial by Fire from the New Yorker, which is Did Texas Execute an Innocent Man? And The Checklist, which is Atul Awande's book about medicine, because I have several kids who are interested in the medical field. And then I chose a selection from Jonathan Kozol's Savage Inequalities. And so they went off, they each chose the one they were most interested in reading. And this time they're going to ask all of the questions about craft and gather together in small groups, much more like a preview of a book club, and talk about those texts in class next week. Our common core text in grade 12 is They Say, I Say, The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing. And in this case, you can see Nick and Tate are studying an infographic, and this is their very first experience with the They Say, I Say model. What does the infographic say? And then what do I say next to it? And then just a glimpse, the first round of book clubs is coming up faster with grade 12s than it is with my grade 9s. I'm still probably 3 or 4 weeks from letting my 9th graders move into book clubs, or actually requiring them to, I should say. I let them at any time they want to read a book with someone else. But my 12th graders are going to be beginning this in the next week. And so I've given them 10 choices. And I'm really curious, as you look over those 10 choices, the kinds of things you notice about them. I would love it if some of you would tweet about, why do you think I chose the 10 books that you can see on the screen? And as you're thinking about that, I know that probably some of them are unfamiliar to you, but I'll tell you, The Boys in the Boat was my favorite book of the summer, closely followed by The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace. They're both brilliant pieces of nonfiction, but they do what all of us as readers crave, which is blend story and information in a really compelling way. So I don't see any tweets yet. Maybe I'm just reading the ones that are posted on the screen, but I'm curious about how you think I made the choices that I did, because the art of decision making, this essential tool that is ours as teachers, for me, some of the decisions that I have to make for my students are based on what I hear in those conferences that I'm having with them. I asked my 12th graders at the start of the year, how many of you have read a book of nonfiction, a whole book of nonfiction? And my students who took AP Language, most of them read Friday Night Lights, and other students who didn't have skim read a whole lot of stuff. And I want to just pause for a minute and think about Louise Rosenblatt's work, because as one of our oldest researchers, the body of work she created, just incredible. And Bob Probst, who I get to work with every year at Booth Bay, has done so much work thinking about her theories. But one of them that's, I think, pretty central to what we talk about with teaching literature is that there are two different ways that you read literature. And one is just an aesthetic experience of the reading, and the other is the afferent, the looking for information piece. And what I want to think about is that the aesthetic experience of reading, as Rosenblatt says, is so dependent upon experiencing it without worrying about, I'm going to be tested on it, or there's the idea that your reading is interrupted if you're constantly looking for information that you believe you're going to be held accountable for. That she really separates the idea that when we sink into a book that we're just experiencing, that we are going to understand it differently. And so when I run into students who have never had that experience with nonfiction, and it's not unusual because they are used to skimming textbooks and skimming their reading, looking for answers, they've never really experienced the power of nonfiction. I want to create that experience for them. And so in the books that I chose, and I no longer have that slide up, so I'm just going to quickly mention a couple things about them. I'm looking for writers who brilliantly connect with readers. So there's a sense of, this is a writer who's talking to me, who has something to say to me. And in Detroit, by Charlie LeDuff, he not only grew up in Detroit, and it's a city that I love. I hope there are some Detroit people out there today. I present there as much as I can. We lived outside of Detroit for 5 years, and I have my heart is in Michigan in many ways. Red Wings, score. But he does a really beautiful job of taking, let's look at this city today, and say, what does it tell us about all cities? But he does it from a personal place because it's his city, his home. A journalist, just a terrific read. In Defense of Food, as many of you know, Michael Pollan's got this amazing ability to make thinking and writing and reading about food just fascinating, and that's what I want. And I don't know yet which books are going to be the big hits in my room this year, but that one has been in the past. Stiff, if you haven't read it, about what happens to the body when it dies, looking at cadavers. You know, this is not a book I'm going to read. I will look at parts of it with students, but it just doesn't fascinate me in a way that it does. I have so many students because we have this amazing AP biology teacher, Lindsay, if you're on today, hey, who has really turned kids onto science. I have many kids who read this each year. And then Hellhound on His Trail by Hampton Sides is the story of the chase after James Earl Ray, after the assassination of Martin Luther King across 2 continents. The incredible ride that this book is. How can you not love history after you read anything by Hampton Sides, but this one in particular? And then I chose The Shallows for all of my tech kids. I have a boy who's definitely going to be a programmer. And I thought there were probably several in his class who are going to be interested in the same book. David and Goliath, my favorite new Malcolm Gladwell book. I read it this summer. The Forever War. Dexter Filkins, it's a companion to The Good Soldiers in my mind. They both went embedded with troops, although also looking at what was happening in the towns. And then The Boys in the Boat, as I mentioned, the race to the Olympics from the University of Washington rowing team, and The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace. Now, every one of these gives my kids a mentor text for what it is they're going to be writing in a whole form, but all I'm asking from them is the aesthetic experience of reading it. Not that they're going to be quizzed on the information or have to remember it, but we will continually stop and pay attention to how does a writer blend these different modes, these different parts of information. Now, one thing that I'm often asked about when I talk about independent reading is, well, what does this look like in a literature class? So I want to go back to the slideshow for a minute and just give you a glimpse of one literature course in our high school. This is Literature and War, and I worked with the teacher, Jason, who's fabulous, a year ago, and he wanted to figure out a way to incorporate book clubs and independent reading into a course that's focused on literature. And what you've got on the left side is the course the way it was when he first came to talk to me, and the teachers who teach this had come up with 3 central core texts from different wars that, you know, they chose because they hoped they would appeal to kids. And then they slowly made their way through those 3 texts in the course of a semester. And what he wanted to shift to was more choice. And so if you look, that he decided that what they were learning from the study of Mouse and Mouse 2, they decided in the end, was the most important text. So that's the one they kept as a core text. And he started the year off with independent reading. And you'll see down at the bottom, it says students select other books from daily book talks. And I have a little picture of Redeployment on there, which was the National Book Award winner. Fabulous book. But those daily book talks were only about literature into war. And so in a literature course, the independent reading is from a wide selection of titles, but they're all titles that have to do with literature during a time of war. And the kids then could choose what they were interested in reading. They had a core text that they studied, and towards the end of the semester, then he put them into book clubs. And when we first planned this together, he came up with 5 titles that he wanted to offer kids. So we've really narrowed the choices when it came time for book clubs. You'll notice that If I Die in a Combat Zone and Lone Survivor are part of the original 5 that are on the first line there under book clubs. And that was because the teachers were really comfortable that they knew those 2 books very well, and they'd only be adding 3 other books that they didn't know as well to the mix. But as the semester kept moving forward, they became really interested. Jason asked if he could add in these other 5 titles so that they had 10 things to choose from for book clubs, because the more choice, the more engagement. And it was really pretty exciting to talk to him even partway through the semester and say, how does this transformation feel? And he said he wouldn't go back, that he had more kids reading and more kids reading more than ever before, and that their depth of understanding about what it means to have literature that is truly about wartime. If you think about, the glimpse from 3 books compared to a kid who now read 10 books in a semester, they're understanding that deepening thinking because they're seeing experiences in war across so many different narrators or authors of memoir. It just becomes such a different experience. So I think that in the past, middle school and high school was often the story of what Kelly Gallagher calls 4x4 teaching, 1 book, 1 essay, a quarter. And in between those studies of core texts, I think all of us hoped that kids would come to love reading. It can feel overwhelming to begin a launch into independent reading. But what I found in my teaching was that I was assigned American literature and I was given a list of core texts. But in that first core text, I had so many kids that were, willingly admitting that they weren't doing the reading, weren't caught up. Oh, I'm not a reader. Oh, and I think that because I was trained in elementary school and had moved from middle school to high school, that just wasn't an answer that I was going to accept. I knew that kids would read. I just didn't have the tools to make it happen. And I can remember my first classroom with my pathetic little, it was probably that wide, 30 or 35 books that I brought in, and I didn't even have enough for 1 class. And I started, combing used bookstores, as so many of you do, just trying to figure out, I didn't know enough books that I thought kids would be interested in. I was a British Lit major for my master's degree, so I had all kinds of, Charlotte Bronte and Jane Austen, not connecting with my high school kids very much. I didn't have enough books. And so I think that so many teachers that I know today are scrambling to figure this piece out, to get that classroom library that will get kids reading, and to carve out of our precious minutes time to let kids read. In my 80 minutes a day for high school reading, high school English, I take 10 minutes, but that 80 minutes is every other day. So I don't see my students 80 minutes every day like I wish I could, but rather it'd be like 40 minutes a day on a regular schedule. And so I take 10 minutes of it to let them read and for me to confer with them, because if they don't read with me in class, there's no way I know that they're reading outside of class. And so many kids, without that little burst of independent reading time, that momentum that we create just by having them there, it drives them to read later on. And so the surprise, it's not really a surprise that Sloan has read 4 books since the start of the year, to me is more about the fact that Sloan has found the books that most closely name his heart. And I end most of my presentations now with a plug for the Book Love Foundation, which I so appreciate how Chris talked about it at the start. And I just want to say that every year, like this last year, we had 190 applications. Every year, the stories that I read and just the resiliency and the persistence of teachers is something that inspires me to try harder the next year. And we're at the end of, we're just distributing all the books right now. My Book Love winners of this year are getting their libraries. I see their pictures on Twitter, and it's just such a beautiful thing to see their excitement. But I am haunted by the 100 other applications, 100 plus applications I read that we just couldn't fund. And so I'm grateful that Chris has made the foundation the recipient of today's donations, because 100% of what you donate goes to teachers and books. We don't take any of it for administrative costs. We're just scrambling to stay afloat with the paperwork that comes through our doors. But the key is that we believe that someday all kids will have access to all of the books that name their hearts, that can show them a path towards empathy, a path towards acceptance of themselves and others, a path towards peace in the world. It sounds like such a lofty goal, but I know for certain that it's possible. And every year I meet kids who haven't read in years and years. And this year, one of my 9th graders on Friday, I told my husband, he was telling the other kids, he wasn't telling me, but as I walked in from hall duty, I heard him say, "You guys see this? You see me reading? You all know I don't read. You see this? I am reading, and I am reading this weekend." And of course, the book was The Maze Runner, which is an absolute win with so many boys. But the look on his face, this is me reading, is completely priceless. And it's worth anything to me to launch a kid into a life that will change them forever as a reader. So anything you can do to help us would be awesome. I think I can take tweet questions or whatever Chris wants me to do at this point. And thank you for being here. Can I just say, anybody who'd give up a Saturday morning to hang out on Twitter, and I see these messages going on, and be at this gathering, that is awesome. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Penny, so much. I actually want to share from Twitter some highlights from your session. Also, you almost made me cry again every time you do this. This happens. So from across your session, Belinda, who's joining us today, says establish momentum in reading. That she loves that phrase. Deb, who's joining us, encourage kids to help me set up the library so that it works for them. I love that message from this morning. Gary, I love this, Penny, you've created this new event that will be happening in Gary's district, thinking of having student and staff do weekly book previews for middle and high school students for the morning announcements. Yay, yes. Awesome. Yeah. That's awesome, Gary. Mary, hi Mary. Mary's joining us today. A library filled with incredible books drives independent reading, and I love this. You can't inspire reading without inspiring resources. Our friend Maggie Roberts says, can I go back to 12th grade and be in your classroom, please?
Please.
Chad says, students need time to read, choice in reading, and time to talk. Angela used books to turn kids on to content area subjects. I love that. And Carol is sharing something that I think so many of us feel. She says, I heard Penny many times over the years, but each time it gives a new perspective. And I know I feel that way. Every time I hear you, I'm both inspired by your message, but I'm also inspired by your dedication to kids and to readers. The love that you have for empowering all of us to empower our children. I swear I tear up every time we talk, Penny. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So just as a reminder to everyone, as Penny mentioned, and I will remind you all throughout the day, the Book Love Foundation is our charity for today that we've adopted. So please do consider anything that you would have spent on coffee or food, or if you're feeling really great and you want to share the money that you would have spent to come to a conference like this today, if instead you'd go to the bookclubfoundation.org, and if you would make a donation there, it'll mean so much to us, but more importantly, it'll mean so much to that stack of applications of people that are trying to create great reading experiences for their kids. I wanted, before we go, to just preview what's coming up, because we have a busy, busy, busy day. So I want to help you navigate that just a little bit, and during each of the sessions, we'll do the same thing too. Coming up in session 1, we have 5 concurrent workshops. I apologize maybe for that, because I just said yes to too many things, because they're all so good. So you have lots and lots of choices, but it means lots and lots of archive reading, watching later. But here are your 5 sessions during session 1. You can find those either by going to our webpage, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. That's the best place to find them. Or if you follow us at the EdCollab on Twitter, we'll be sending out links to these as well. So during session 1, workshop 1 is Kristen Zemke and Don Goebel talking about media literacy. Workshop 2 is Frankie and Bill, who'll be talking about digital reading, what's essential. Workshop 3, Aileen, Ryan, and Melissa are talking about using technology to support literacy learning in students with autism spectrum disorders. I'm really looking forward to that one. Session 4, Kim Yaris of Birkins and Yaris, that many of you know, or you might have their new book, is talking about 3 practical lessons for building a community of strong readers. And then session 5, Marquette Pierce from here at the EdCollab is sharing a session on flipped instruction, practical and powerful tips. If you notice each of those sessions, you'll find this on our webpage too, have grade level spans. Those are the grade levels that the presenters are aiming towards. However, anyone's welcome to go to anything. All you have to do is click a link. And then, of course, be sure to check out the Book Love Foundation today, both to donate to that charity, and you also could perhaps write an application too if you would like to build a library for your students. And then as you're tweeting across these sessions, remember to use the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering and the number as well. And I just want to take a second, which is totally selfish of me, but just to do a personal plug here. I personally, a lot went into today from everyone who's working hard on building the website, building everything. So there's a huge, exciting day. And so I would like to make a special dedication of the day, at least from me. This weekend, my grandmother, Grandma Norma, is celebrating a milestone birthday. It's not polite to tell a woman's age, so I won't say how old, but she's celebrating a major, major milestone. And her birthday is on Sunday. And so Grandma Norma was one of my first teachers. When my mother was working part-time, we'd get dropped off at Grandma Norma and Grandpa Art's house, and Grandma taught us to love learning and to explore and to be curious. So it's a little personal aside, but I just want to say happy birthday, Grandma Norma, and I'd like to dedicate any part that I have of today to you. Thanks for everything you've given to me. So for all of you, thanks for joining us today. Penny, you're incredible and amazing, and I'm so glad that you could spend time with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. We look forward to seeing you on Twitter and for you joining in some awesome sessions coming up. Have an amazing rest of your day.